Today I'm going to talk about something that is really, Barbara gave me the option. She was like, you're going to be doing a lot with the podcasting and stuff, so, you know, if you don't want to get up and talk, you don't have to. And I was like, no, I want to lecture these young adults. I'm going to talk about something really near and dear to my heart today, and it's materiality, it's toxicity, and it's really important, I think, that all of you understand as designers, future designers, that your impact on the built environment is going to be massive. I don't know if you know this, but the average designer has about 27 times the buying power of a typical consumer. And if you're working for a giants firm, which is like one of the top 100 firms in the industry, your power of consumption is 111 times that of a normal consumer. So if you don't think it matters what you put in your buildings and your houses and your spaces, you're mistaken. It matters a lot. We just had that long introduction about me. I've been podcasting for, well, let's see, since probably about 2020. I have a podcast partner, Verda Alexander. She's a super talented designer and artist based in San Francisco. She founded the design firm O+A. And we were literally having breakfast one day in New York City, getting caught up, and we came up with the idea. She said, you know, I've been designing spaces for these tech companies like Uber and Yahoo and all these Silicon Valley companies, super successful firm. And she said, I'm realizing that I'm designing spaces for like the top 1%, you know, and they have these beautiful spaces that they work in, and every 5 years they decide they're going to renovate it or update it. And, you know, we throw everything away and we start fresh. And it's a really glamorous way to design, but it was starting to weigh on her. And so I said, well, wow, Verda, like, I would love to team up with you, and we should do like some showroom events where we talk about the planet and the impact that design has on the planet. And we actually planned this thing out. We had a bunch of them locked in, and then you know what happened, right? And then COVID hit. I feel like 80% of the conversations that we have with each other end with, well, yeah, and then COVID hit, you know? So then we were screwed. We're like, so now what do we do? We'd never podcasted before, but we said, well, why don't we just do a podcast? And we literally had to Google how to podcast. And that's how we got started. And I think it taught me how to just not fear failure, right? Like, what was the worst that could happen by starting a podcast? People don't listen to it, it doesn't work, and then you go back to whatever you were doing before. So it did teach me a little bit about being fearless. And one of our guests taught us something that I really loved. His name is Russell Goldberg. He's the founder of a really cool Brooklyn-based manufacturer called Stickbulb. And they make lights by repurposing, you know those water towers you see on the roofs in New York City all the time? Maybe not, but they're there. When they take those down, he collects the wood, and he makes these amazing looking lights. And he said to us, he said, don't wait until you know you're right before you start talking. He said, a lot of people wait too long until they're 100% sure that what they're about to say is right. And then they say it, and then it's too late, right? So that was really good advice. I'm not going to worry about these learning objectives. We're not going to get through them today anyway. I want to start, that's just official stuff. Yeah. I want to start with just some photographs. I'm going to selfishly give you a little bit of my origin story. I grew up in rural West Virginia. I grew up in Appalachia. I mean, we were deep in the Blue Mountains of West Virginia. And a couple of years ago, I decided to go back home to see what was still there. So my sister and I kind of drove around, and my mom was a single mother of two and realized that she had to go back to school in order to survive. And so we moved in with my grandmother in West Virginia. My grandmother married my grandfather, whose name was Wilbur. He had two brothers, Wilson and Willis. You can't make this up, right? So my great uncle Wilson was like my primary caregiver, right? He was a moonshiner and a hermit, and this is his house that we found. It did not look like this when he lived in it. I don't think he ever painted it. I spent a lot of time with my Uncle Wilson. He taught me how to roll cigarettes, believe it or not, when I was 8 years old. We would make this moonshine, and he would put it in these plastic milk jugs, and he would hide it under that front porch there. And then when my mom would come by to pick me up, she'd be like, Uncle Wilson got any moonshine in here? And I would be like, no. And she would walk around looking for it. And if she found it, she never poured it out, but she would put stuff in it like dead flies and crap like that. And I never saw him care a bit about a dead fly in his moonshine. So this is Uncle Wilson's house. This is my Uncle Arby's house. That was my mom's brother, and he was kind of like our patriarch. He ran a third-generation sawmill, and we literally spent our summers just knocking around in the back of his pickup truck. This was before automobile safety. No car seats. And that muddy creek that you see running in front of his house, we swam in all the time. And, you know, nobody ever said, geez, this creek's kind of muddy. Should we be swimming in it? We never worried about it. The only thing we ever worried about were copperheads, which were all over the place in West Virginia. And we even found our old bus stop, which was clearly there before the guardrail. But we would have like 4 of us in there waiting for the bus. So I was really surprised that that was still standing. And so West Virginia is a funny state. It's a beautiful state, but it's very much impoverished. This is where we lived with my grandmother. Now, this double wide was not there. Her house burned down while she was living there. She lost everything. Unfortunately, she wasn't in the house when it caught fire, but it burned to the ground, and my Uncle Arby moved her to a different house. But it was interesting. We went here, and we found this double wide. You can even see, like, this is her, does this work? Yeah, that's the original sidewalk that would have gone to her house, and I think that's part of the original foundation. And this green garage here was my Uncle Arby's garage, where he would work on his lumber trucks and stuff like that. So I was always hanging around in there. In fact, I remember one time there was one of those, you know those lights they have in garages that you can like hook it and work, and then you move it and you hook it under an axle. I remember touching it, and I got electrocuted so bad. I couldn't touch, to this day when I see one of those lights, I'm like, don't touch it. Don't touch it. So why am I taking time to tell you guys about my life in rural West Virginia? Well, I'm telling you about this because what I just showed you is a fence line community, right? Has anybody heard of a fence line community? You guys know what those are? Okay, so it's ironic that you don't know what they are because you really should, but this shows us how far disconnected we can be from what actually happens. A fence line community is a community that's located right next to a petroleum refinery or a petrochemical factory. See, these factories and refineries, they don't set up in nice neighborhoods, right? They set up in impoverished, disenfranchised, disadvantaged neighborhoods where the people can't do anything about it, right? And the land is so inexpensive, that's the only place that they can afford to live. And so these people are exposed to the toxic element created by these factories, which are not very regulated, okay? That's a fence line community. Now, where I grew up was a little town called Center Point, West Virginia, about an hour from Parkersburg, West Virginia. And Parkersburg, West Virginia is famous for the story of DuPont. Okay, DuPont has a Teflon factory in Parkersburg, West Virginia. And back in the, I can't remember exactly what year it was. If you saw the movie Dark Waters with Mark Ruffalo and Anne Hathaway, it was about this DuPont factory in Parkersburg, West Virginia. And what happened was DuPont was using these very, very dangerous chemicals called PFAS chemicals. I'm sure we've all heard of them now, right? They're also called forever chemicals because they bond very strongly together, And when they are out there in the environment, they don't break down. When you get exposed to them, when you consume them or absorb them, they stay in your body for a very, very long time. So they're called forever chemicals. They're really, really nasty. Anyway, this farmer, Wilbur Tennant, actually found his cows were dying, right, on his farm in Parkersburg. Come to realize that the DuPont factory was flushing toxic water into the groundwater supply in Parkersburg, and it was killing his farms, his cows, okay? And so he took on DuPont. That's the whole story of Dark Waters. And the story of DuPont is that they fought him for 20 years, okay? And eventually, I believe it was in 2007, eventually, that's not important, eventually they settled 3,500 cases with residents in Parkersburg, West Virginia, for a total of $670 million. And there's an interesting learning case here. $670 million, and the next day, DuPont's stock, what do you think happened to it? Yeah, you think it crashed. It went up. It went up because experts thought, I would have thought it crashed too. Right, perfectly reasonable expectation. It should have crashed. Experts said DuPont's going to lose $1 billion in this lawsuit. So when DuPont lost $670 million, they were like, okay, gamble paid off. Well, what was the gamble here? The gamble from DuPont, DuPont knew that they were manufacturing with toxins back in the 50s. They had employees that were coming down with cancer, and they ignored it, okay? In the mid-'80s, they had a scientist do research that proved that they were using PFAS ingredients that were carcinogens. They buried it. Their strategy here was, listen, we're going to make as much profit as we possibly can for as long as we can, pre-regulation, pre-litigation, right? So they made a shit ton of money between the 50s and 2000 when that lawsuit finally played out. And even today, guess what? It's not against the law for them to manufacture with those toxic ingredients. They just can't dump it into the groundwater, right? So DuPont gambled, and it paid off. And I'm telling you this because I want you to understand that corporate America is not going to bail us out of this problem, okay? We, unfortunately, are surrounded with toxic materials, and we can't expect companies to do the right thing because companies are not people, okay? Companies are beholden to shareholders. And we have been addicted to plastic, a petroleum-based material, since 1950. Barbie started in 1959, right? So the challenge here with petroleum-based toxins, right, I'm moving on from PFAS to plastic, is that plastic never goes away. You guys have heard that, right? It just breaks down into microplastics, and we end up eating a fish that's ingested microplastics. So it's a bad thing that we're using so much plastic. Now, you may have heard recently that the Trump administration, I'm not going to make this political today, the Trump administration deregulated, they canceled, there was a federal regulation that said you can't use plastic straws in any federal building, right? So Trump came out and said, the paper straws are terrible, they don't work, we're going back to plastic. So you can't use paper straws anymore in federal buildings. Now let me explain something to you. As the petroleum industry sees demand drop because electric vehicles become more popular, their next big revenue stream will have to be plastic. It's petroleum-based. That is how they will continue to pump oil out of the ground. So we are going to see a lot of plastic in our future. That's what the lobbyists, that's what the corporate council, that's what they're all going to be pushing for. This is the first step. This isn't really just Donald Trump saying, I don't like paper straws. This is Donald Trump saying, I'm going to continue to promote the petroleum industry and the fossil fuel industry, right? And plastic straws is just a symbolic starting point. So Beware of that. That's what's happening right now. We need to know about it. There's a group out there. Has anybody heard of the Lonely Whale Foundation? Have you? Oh, that's awesome. So the Lonely Whale Foundation, you guys know the story behind the Lonely Whale? Oh, man, doesn't it tug at your heartstrings? All right, should we tell everybody about the Lonely Whale? So there's a story about oceanic researchers that, using old World War II technology, found, they would track whales. And they found one particular whale that was communicating at the wrong frequency, at 52 hertz. And so this whale wasn't getting any responses back. It was sort of like me sending an email, right? Nobody was replying. And so this whale didn't realize that it was communicating at the wrong frequency. And so scientists called it the lonely whale. Isn't that horrible? That's a really sad story. So Adrian Grenier, if you know him, is an actor who was part of that HBO series, The Entourage. He started a foundation called the Lonely Whale Foundation that is dedicated to removing plastic from the ocean or increasing awareness of ocean plastic. And one of the first things that they did was a campaign called Stop Sucking. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this, but one of our earlier episodes, we had a woman on whose name was Dune Ives, and Dune at the time was like the executive director of the Lonely Whale Foundation. And they created this Stop Sucking campaign, and Dune explained it to me. She said, well, we chose to target straws, not because straws are everywhere. Like, I get it, you know, somebody pulled a straw out of the nose of a turtle, and, you know, not because straws are everywhere, not because straws aren't recyclable and they break the recycling machines, the sorting machines, but because we can relate to straws, right? If we make a pact in this room, right, to stop using straws, that's something that we can all do. When you go out to dinner, somebody can give you a straw, and you can say, no, thanks, I don't need a straw, right? So they wanted to start campaigning with something that people felt like they could have an impact on, right? If we sat in here today and said, let's set a target. Oh, the target is to save the planet. That's a pretty lofty target, and we're probably not going to know how to manage that. But the Stop Sucking campaign was really effective. In fact, Lonely Whale Foundation reached out to Starbucks, because it was a Seattle-based initiative. They reached out to Starbucks to see if Starbucks wanted to participate, because Starbucks uses their iconic green straw in all of their drinks. And they said, Starbucks, you can be the villain in this story, or you can be the hero in this story. And believe it or not, Starbucks said, yeah, we'll take the villain, right? So understand that corporate strategy always trumps a healthy planet, right? Always. Don't ever stop believing that. You have to be. I'm here today to jade all of you. That's my job. This is an indication. If you wonder how much plastic we consume, right? Have you guys all heard that, like, we don't recycle anymore? Have you guys heard that? We recycle probably in this country about 5% of what we consume. Globally, I think it's a little bit better. It's at like 9%. The reality is that plastic is a linear material. It's not a circular material, okay? Now, you may say, but John, because that's my name, John, you may say, John, on the back of my plastic, I see these triangles, right? So it's 3 little arrows, and then it says a 1 or a 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 6. So doesn't that mean that all that stuff is recyclable? And I would tell you, no, it's not. Only the 1 and the 2 is recyclable. Everything else you need to throw in your garbage so it's managed properly, right? Everything, those symbols that you see that maybe we've always assumed means it's recyclable is an attempt by the chemical industry to make the consumer base think that their plastic is recyclable. It's really just an identification code for recyclers so that they can separate plastic when they get it at their recycling center. Right? So don't be fooled. And by the way, this blue area here shows you what percentage of the plastic we are recycling. This is the part of the percentage of our consumed plastic that we are incinerating for energy, right? And you can see we're consuming about 100 billion plastic bags a year, which equates to 12 million barrels of oil. So good for the oil industry. And, you know, I know that recycling is a tricky thing because we all have this thing called eco-guilt, right? And when we can throw something into that blue container, it helps us a little bit with our eco-guilt. We don't have to know what happens to what we throw in that blue. We just have to know that we're throwing it in the blue container, and so we're recycling it. But really, you know, the reality is that a lot of these recycling containers that we think we're using, I actually was in a hotel in New Jersey, and they had that little, you know, garbage can. I'm like, I wonder what happens if I lift the lid here. It's just one, but it's the same bag. So house cleaning comes, they pop off the little lid, and they take the bag. This is in a Starbucks. Same thing, same thing. So maybe you're better off not looking too closely. Sometimes we can reuse plastic. Right? Sometimes it works. Believe it or not, when I grew up, we used to use Wonder bags because our boots weren't waterproof. And so we put our feet in a Wonder Bread bag, and then our socks would stay warm. Did you guys do that? Yeah. We're not old. But usually it doesn't work out, right? And we know that we're dumping like 7 million tons of plastic in the ocean every hour, and it's like the equivalent of a dump truck just dumping. We are at, how many trillions now? We are at like 170 trillion pieces of plastic in the ocean, right? So we have the great fortune of having, this guy is so cool, his name is Marcus Ericsson. I think I've told you this story before. Marcus Ericsson is an ex-Marine, but he's a scientist, and he was in the Persian Gulf War, and he was in a foxhole, and he was watching the Kuwaiti oil fields burn, right? And he said to his foxhole mate, he said, man, when I get out of the Marines, all I'm going to do is go after the petroleum industry, because this is crazy what's happening, right? So what he did was he made a little plastic raft out of plastic water bottles, and he sailed it down the Mississippi River to raise awareness of all the garbage and all the plastic that's in the Mississippi River, one of our main waterways, right? But then he decided that that wasn't enough. And so he created a scientific community called Five Gyres, the Five Gyres Institute. Now, a gyre is a confluence of currents in the ocean. And one of the most famous gyres is called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Have you guys heard of that? Right? A lot of people think that it's like an island of floating garbage, you know, and we need to go out there and scoop it up and bring it home. It's not. It's like a stew, right? So Marcus is actually holding up a glass of water, of seawater, from the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. That's what it is. That's what the seawater looks like. So imagine being a fish, like trying to live in that environment, right? That's because plastic, you know, when it falls into the ocean, it's gone. It is not recoverable. That's the way you have to look at it. When plastic goes into a landfill and it's not properly managed, it's gone. It's going to be in the ocean. Okay? And the problem is once it gets into the ocean, it decomposes very quickly. So most of the plastic in the ocean we can't get to, right? It breaks apart really quickly, and then it goes down to the bottom. And a lot of it is in the form of what they call microfeces, which little tiny microplastics that fish eat, and then of course we eat the fish, and so it comes right back to us, which we totally deserve, right? So what Marcus did was created the Five Gyres Institute, okay? And the other thing is that, you know, once plastic gets all mixed up and put into the ocean and it starts to decompose and break apart, nobody can recycle it, right? Because nobody can separate it anymore, and there's nothing you can do with mixed plastic yet. Nobody's found a way. They're talking about chemical recycling, but please don't believe that. Right? Chemical recycling is not realistic right now. There is no chemical recycling happening. But there's a term called chemical recycling to make people think that we're recycling all the plastic. We're not. So he actually graduated from the Mississippi River raft to this boat that he made using he made it using 15,000 water bottles. He dug it all up from landfills. The central part of the boat here is an airplane fuselage. Everything is just made out of garbage. And he decided he's going to sail this from Los Angeles to Hawaii through the Fifth Gyre, through the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And he got several weeks into this trip, and he realized that he grossly miscalculated how long it was going to take him to sail, right? And as a result, he and his co-pilot there, co-captain, ran out of food. Right? So they had a long way to go, and he was in radio contact with his wife at the time, and she said, wow, you know, what a coincidence. There's actually this woman who's rowing a canoe to Hawaii along with you. You don't know this, but she actually has radioed back that her water converter, you know, the thing you use to convert seawater to fresh water so you can drink it, it's malfunctioning, it's not working. So she doesn't have fresh water right now. So if you guys can hook up, then you can give her some water and she can give you some food, and then you can make it the rest of the way to Hawaii. So they literally, can you imagine this, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, a canoe and this boat? Like, where are you? Turn left. Okay, keep turning. And then they actually find each other. It blows my mind that they found each other. And that he was able to get like a bunch of granola bars. They gave her one of their extra water converters. And then everyone was, okay, see you later, good luck, you know, and they were off on their own. Mind-blowing. This is another less glamorous photo of the boat, but you can see it's nothing too gorgeous. I don't think I would take that down the Mississippi, let alone sail it from LA to Hawaii. So, you know, the problem with plastic and the problem with these PFAS ingredients is, you know, we get excited when we see something like this. Like, how cool would it be to have a pair of pants that I could spill something on and I don't have to worry about a stain, blah, blah, blah. We all have to recognize that this is not natural, right? Right? And we should be okay with being inconvenienced to have to wash a stain out or live with a stain. So, you know, I want you to be aware of this. When you look at materials, I was with a manufacturer for a long time called Human Scale, and we ran into a problem with our chairs because we wanted to be PFAS free. Well, the problem with that is that all of your stain-resistant coatings contain PFAS. So we really didn't know what we were going to do. We wanted to be able to get our chair specified from designers, but designers were saying, if it's got PFAS, we'd rather not specify it. So we were up, you know, and designers were saying it's got to be stain resistant. That's on the spec. So we did something called a reverse Weizenbeek. You guys know what a Weizenbeek test is? Some of you may. A Weizenbeek is a test that tests the durability of a textile. Okay, that's when you see double rubs. So you'll see a textile card that says good for 150,000 double rubs. It means this machine rubs it 150,000 up, down, 150,000 times. Test the durability. So we did a reverse. So we put our fabric on that Weizenbeek with the PFAS stain-resistant coating, and we did a double rub to see how long that stain-resistant coating would last. Anybody want to guess how long the stain-resistant coating lasted? That's a good guess. The equivalent of about 6 months before it rubbed off. So there's two problems here, right? You guys pick up on both these problems? First problem is you're paying for a stain-resistant coating that's only lasting 6 months. Second problem is where the hell does it go? Yeah, home with you on the ass of your jeans. Because remember, these PFAS ingredients, they don't break down. So it's in your jeans, you go home, you wash them, now it's everywhere, right? You ever see that, what is that, Cat in the Hat book where, you know, he gets that pink stuff on mom's dress and then he shakes it and it goes, before you know it, that's Dr. Seuss talking about PFAS. So we thought we'd really try to get to the bottom of this, and and we decided, let's reach out to the American Chemistry Council. Sounds benign, doesn't it? Well, they're a lobbying group for the chemical industry. So we had them on the podcast, and we had a great podcast. They had 3 people in the room because, you know, nobody could answer a question until they all conferred, right? So we knew, we knew that it was not good for us. We did the podcast, we launched it, and then a week later we had to take it down. American Chemistry Council called us and said, you got to take that podcast off. We were like, well, it was your guy, right? So not very transparent in an industry that really needs transparency. You can get exposure to dangerous chemicals a bunch of different ways, right? And you may be aware of these abrasion. A volatilization is when you paint it on a wall and it breaks off and you consume it that way. Oxidation is when it's decomposing. Leaching is what, so you may have heard about the EPA banning 6 PFAS ingredients, right? Those were PFAS chemicals that were leaching into water from plastic water bottles. The challenge with that regulation is that there's over 12,000 different PFAS chemicals being manufactured today. So to ban 6 of them gives you an idea of how regulated the industry is not. These are different ways that you can have exposure, right? A lot of people think, why should I worry about the furniture that I specify into this space? Nobody's eating it, right? This isn't food. Right? We're not consuming our furniture, but we are, actually, because the furniture is always off-gassing. It's always coming apart, okay? We're leaning on it. It's absorbing into our skin. And I want to remind you, when you specify something like a desk that has formaldehyde in it, right? You may think to yourself, nobody's going to ingest that formaldehyde. But you do, because you sit at that desk. I mean, we're inside 90% of our day. You sit at that desk 8, 9, 10 hours a day. You're leaning on it, right? It's going into your skin. You're breathing it in, right? But that's not the only thing. Think about the contamination points of a toxic material, right? Where does it start? It starts in those fence-line communities. It starts with these really poor communities, and these are the people that have to work with these toxins, right? These are the people, so you're exposed in the creation of that chemical. Okay, that's an exposure point. You're exposed when that chemical is used to manufacture a product. That's a second exposure point. You're contaminated again. You're exposed again when you use that as a consumer. Right? You're exposed if you're an installer and you're installing that material. You're exposed again when that material comes to the end of its life and you have to remove it, tear it out, and then it goes into a landfill where it leaches into the groundwater. So multiple exposure points. One of our most recent podcast episodes, we talked to this beautiful person. Her name is Keisha DeFries Lawrence, and she is a member of the Ramapo Lenape Nation. It's an indigenous tribe in the Northeast. So she lives in Connecticut, but their tribe extends into like Rhode Island and parts of New York. And she introduced us to something called sovereign science, which is a very maternal way of caring for the earth, right? We traditionally, because we are a gender-biased society, we traditionally have a very paternalistic, masculine approach to our problem solving. So when we have trees that are dying, what do? We turn to chemicals. Let's spray it with an herbicide, or let's spray it with a pesticide. That's a very aggressive, masculine way of treating a problem. Sovereign science is a more feminine, matriarchal approach to understanding the environment. What is it that's killing this tree, right? And if we kill what's killing this tree, will that make matters worse, or will that fix the problem, right? So it's a different way of looking at things. She also introduced us to the concept of the 7th generation principle, which is an amazing indigenous way of looking ahead. Basically, they don't make a decision that affects the planet or their place or their animal brothers until they look 7 generations ahead. And if they can feel good that 7 generations are protected, they can make that decision, right? You tell me I'm almost out of time. So I talk about the 7th generation because there was a study done in 2015. I live in Connecticut. I can talk really fast. Anyway, it was called the body burden, okay? And so what they did was they tested the umbilical blood of newborn babies, okay? And here's what they found. They found 200 industrial chemicals and pollutants. They found 287 total chemicals. They found that these chemicals came from pesticides, consumer product ingredients, and wastes from burning coal, gasoline, and garbage. Okay, this is from babies that are just born. So we consider babies to be pre-polluted. We're all pre-polluted. These umbilical cord tests are not unique. This is the problem, right? This is the problem with our toxic environment. 8 perfluorochemicals, which are PFAS ingredients, used in fast food packaging, clothes, and textiles, including the Teflon chemical PFOA, right? So we're exposing unborn babies to all of this. 180 of the chemicals were known to cause cancer, right? And then 217 were known to be toxic to the brain and nervous system. 208 caused birth defects in animal tests. So this from umbilical blood. Kind of crazy. Cancer Alley is an area along the Mississippi River which is ripe with petrochemical refineries, and it's got a cancer incidence rate that's like 8 times what the national average is, right? How are we regulating our chemicals? I've got like 5 minutes, so I'm going to go really quickly. We're doing a really great job. We're doing so well that January is Firefighter Cancer Awareness Month, right? I mean, we're thinking that we're making an impact here because we're just giving the firefighters the money. So you know, smoke from fires is really, really, really toxic. Let me tell you real quickly the reason why we're not regulating. In 1976, the EPA created something called the Toxic Substance Control Act, okay? And what they basically said was, okay, we're making about 60,000 chemicals right now. They tried to write a Chemical Regulation Act. They didn't know how to do it, and they actually reached out to the chemical industry for help writing this piece of regulation. So the chemical industry basically regulated itself, right? And this Toxic Substance Control Act, ever since 1976, has not had the teeth to be really, truly effective. And what they said was, we're going to eliminate the precautionary principle, right? The precautionary principle is how the FDA works. Until you know that what we're making is harmless and doesn't hurt anybody, you can't make it. When you can prove that it doesn't hurt anybody, you can start making it. The EPA said it's going to be just the opposite. The EPA has to prove that the chemical is harmful. So the burden of proof is on the EPA. Do you realize how impossible that is? So what happens is the EPA has to work with the chemical manufacturer to get test reports back so that the EPA can determine whether or not the chemical is harmful. And the EPA has 90 days to make a decision based on the information that the chemical company is giving them, right? And federal regulation does not require a chemical company to tell the EPA or give the EPA any help in testing so that the EPA can test for human exposure. So the EPA doesn't even know how to find this chemical in the human body to determine whether or not it's going to be safe. So as a result of that, we're probably making about 85,000 chemicals right now. Do you guys have any idea how many have been banned by the EPA? I think we're at like 9, right? So it's completely ineffective. We're not regulating our chemical industry, and there's a lot that you as designers can do about it. We have PFAS we have to deal with, right? There's acetate, which is just a bug killer. That's now been released, right? The EU got rid of it 20 years ago. The EPA just proposed easing restrictions on it. Ethylene oxide is a chemical that we use to sterilize equipment, and it's being stored in warehouses all over the country, and it's a major health issue right now. Asbestos is coming back, right? So they use asbestos to make bulletproof vests, for example. So now you have an ethics card you got to play, right? Do we ban asbestos, or do we just allow it in bulletproof vests? What's going on with asbestos? They did ban it, but they have 12 years to figure it out. So we're still making stuff with asbestos all over the place. This is a toxic release inventory. So factories that are trying to actually do the right thing have to release a report that shows the federal government when they are releasing a toxin into the air or into the water supply. This is one, it was established in 1986. This is last year's toxic release. So, I mean, each of those little red dots is a factory that's releasing toxins and being honest about it. So imagine how many are doing it unknowingly, unwittingly, and you know, don't want to tell anybody about it. Okay. Oh, this is I was going to talk about this. This is just a podcast. This guy is Auden Schindler. Just wrote a book called Terrible Beauty. Highly recommend it. Auden talks about something like corporate complicity. So this is how today, when I make you guys feel like shit because all I've done is throw all this shit at you, what I want you to understand is it's not your fault, right? What Auden Schindler says is, you didn't wake up this morning right, and decide to pour the milk on your cereal from a jug that's petroleum-based plastic. You didn't make that decision, right? You didn't make the decision to pour your dairy creamer from a plastic single-use container that's going to wind up in the ocean. You didn't make that decision, right? Coffee made that decision. Your dairy company made that. So don't blame yourself. You drove today in a combustible engine that's putting all kinds of carbon into the atmosphere. That's also not your fault. You didn't make the decision to drive that car today, right? Corporate complicity is a thing, right? And we can have an impact, right? We can vote. You can vote. We can get people out of office that are in the pockets of big auto and big oil and big pharma and all that stuff. Aud's an amazing guy. Real quickly, this is just way too much, but I just want to talk to you real quickly about declare labels. So this is something that you as designers can use. It's an amazing tool. It's like a nutritional label for furniture. Okay? You should ask for declare labels. What a declare label does, it tells you where the final assembly point is, what the life expectancy is, end-of-life options. But here, really importantly, it tells you the ingredients, okay? And if there's anything on the red list, so the red list is a list of known toxins that we should try to avoid. They're all totally illegal, right? It's up to about, I think, over 8,000 chemicals right now. That's what's mind-blowing. These are chemicals that are known to be harmful to humans, right? So we make a list so we know about them, but we don't do anything about them. We can still make anything we want using those toxins. But companies can voluntarily list them on this declare label. And if it's a red list ingredient, it goes in red. So you can see it, not being a chemical scientist. You can look at a declare label and see, are there any ingredients here that are in red? And by ingredients, we really mean substances, right? So this is the equivalent of if I say to you, these chocolate chip cookies are really good, like what's in them? Give me the ingredients, right? And you say, well, milk, eggs, flour, sugar, vanilla, and chocolate chips. I would say, okay, thank you, that's a great starting point. But I need to know what goes into your chocolate chips and what goes into your vanilla. Like what are the substances, what are the chemical ingredients of that vanilla? Let's take a look at that. So that's what we look at in a declare label, which makes it really useful. Another really good one is the HPD, which is a health product declaration. Okay, that also shows you the substances that go into a material and a building material. So I'm going to have to end on that because I'm out of time. What else we got here? Oh, another great tool. I just want to point out, great website called Ecomedes. Get on it. Create a login. It's free. It will allow you to product search by green label, by building certification, by brand, right? So if, for example, you say, I want to, just for giggles, I want to create a conference room that's completely PVC free, right? You can actually go on here and you can start your search with conference room tables and find conference room tables, find their declare labels, look at the declare label, make sure it doesn't have PVC in it, specify that, do the same thing with some chairs. So Ecomedes is a great tool for those designers that are trying to really design with the environment in mind. So just a couple of things that you guys can do, right? I think the most important thing that you can do is just stop. You as practicing designers have the ability just to stop. And it may seem overwhelming, but you can start with something simple. You can say, I just don't want to specify any PFAS. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to stop specifying PFAS. Start with that, and then you'd be amazed. Pretty soon you'll get to PVC, and you'll stop specifying PVC, right? And pretty soon you'll find that the manufacturers that are doing the right thing are the ones that are in your wheelhouse. And you'll find that you're hanging out with the right people, right? So it can seem overwhelming because when I was a kid, we never talked about saving the planet. You know what I mean? Like we never talked about the planet. The planet was this universal thing that was always going to be okay, right? And I will end on this one thing. I saw a video the other day of Carl Sagan, who's a really famous economist, who pointed out to people that in 1990, right, the Cold War, we all know what the Cold War was. He asked the group, he said, you guys know how much money the United States spent on the Cold War with Russia, right? worried about Russia invading the United States. We were so worried about it, we spent over $10 trillion. And Carl Sagan said that, do you know that $10 trillion buys everything in this country except the land? Every building, every car, every diaper, every toy, buys everything except the land, right? We didn't know for sure that Russia was going to invade us. Obviously, we didn't because they never did. But it didn't keep us from spending $10 trillion on this Cold War. So remember that the next time somebody says, oh, climate change, like we don't even know for sure that we got climate change. And it would cost us so much money to transition to green energy. We probably shouldn't do it. Just remind them that we spent $10 trillion to fight the Russians that we never really had to fight, right? I'll end with that. And then thank you guys very much. It was really great to be here. I appreciate your attention.